The baby arrived on a Tuesday morning. I remember that because Tuesdays were the only days I worked from home back then, I had just sat down with coffee when someone knocked, 3 quick taps, impatient. When I opened the door, there was no one standing there, just a carrier on the doormat. Inside, a baby was sleeping under a thin blanket, one tiny hand curled near her cheek. Tucked into the handle was a folded piece of paper in my sister's handwriting. I didn't read it right away. I stood there staring at the street, expecting her car to pull back around the corner. It never did. The note was short. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Said I was the only one she trusted. Said she'd come back when things got better. That was the last time I heard from her. When I called my parents that afternoon, they didn't rush over the way I thought they would. My mother sighed before I even finished explaining. "Well," she said, "she's your burden now. Not our grandchild. Not, we'll figure this out. Just a quiet line drawn in the sand. I thought it would be temporary, a few weeks, maybe months. But weeks turned into routines. Bottles warming at midnight. Pediatrician visits. The slow, clumsy learning curve of becoming responsible for a life that didn't ask for any of this. At first, I introduced her as my niece. Then eventually I stopped explaining. She grew up in the small house I rented at the edge of town, the kind of place where every room carries the sound of footsteps. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. I learned which cartoon theme songs meant breakfast was over and it was time to get dressed. She asked about her mom when she was 6. I told her the truth. I knew that her mother had left and we didn't know where she went. She didn't ask again for a long time after that. My parents visited exactly twice during those 10 years. Once when she was 3. They brought a stuffed animal and stayed 40 minutes. The second time was when she turned 8. My father spent most of the visit talking about property taxes. After that, silence again. So when the envelope from their lawyer arrived 10 years later, it took a while for the words to make sense. They were suing for custody. According to the paperwork, I had intentionally isolated the child from her grandparents. They claimed I had refused contact and hidden her from the family. I sat at the kitchen table reading it while she colored beside me. She looked up and asked why I seemed distracted. I told her it was just paperwork. The next few months were strange. Lawyers speaking in calm voices about something that felt deeply personal. Requests for documentation. School records, medical forms. At first I thought the case would collapse quickly. Surely the truth was obvious. But family disputes have a way of twisting memory. Suddenly the story being told about me was very confident, very polished. They said I had taken advantage of my sister's temporary absence. They said I had pushed them away. It was unsettling hearing your own life described by people who weren't there. My lawyer told me to gather everything, not just the official documents, everything. So I went through a decade of emails, texts, call logs. I found the messages I had sent my parents the first year, asking if they wanted to visit, the invitations to birthdays they never answered, photos I'd shared that received no reply. There were also the legal notices from when my sister officially disappeared from all known addresses, records showing I had reported the abandonment. Piece by piece, it filled a folder, a thick one. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. My parents sat across the room, dressed carefully, looking calm. They barely looked at me. When it was their turn, they spoke about family bonds, about how important it was for a child to grow up surrounded by relatives who loved her. Listening to them, you might have believed they had been trying to see her for years. I didn't interrupt. When my lawyer finished speaking, I reached into my bag and handed him the sealed folder we had prepared. He passed it to the judge. The room went quiet as the judge opened it. He read for several minutes. Then he stopped and looked up. His eyes moved between me and my parents. "Do they even know what you have here?" he asked. I glanced across the room. My parents looked puzzled, maybe a little irritated by the delay. I nodded. "No," I said, "they don't." The judge leaned back slightly, still holding the papers. There was no dramatic moment, no raised voices, just a shift in the air. When he asked me to explain the documents, I spoke calmly. I described the day the baby arrived, the attempts to contact my family, the unanswered invitations. I explained what those 10 years looked like from inside the house where she grew up. Doctor visits, school conferences, the ordinary rhythm of raising a child, no speeches, just facts. By the time I finished, the courtroom was very still. The judge didn't say much after that, but the tone of the hearing had changed in a way that was impossible to ignore. A week later, the ruling arrived. My parents' custody petition was dismissed. There was no celebration when I read it, just a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That evening, I picked her up from school like usual. She climbed into the passenger seat and started telling me about a science project involving volcanoes. Her backpack spilled papers everywhere. Halfway home, she asked if everything with the paperwork was okay. I told her it was. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to talking about lava. The road ahead was the same one we'd driven for years. And as the house came into view at the end of the street, I realized something simple. No court decision could really define who had raised her. That part had already been decided a long time ago.